This, of course, is as good as any place to talk about that because we've got a beautiful view of the lake here. So, in prehistoric times, Lake Champlain, which was actually a sea to begin with, was formed by a glacier that parked itself right here and then, of course, melted as the Earth formed itself. So the prehistoric shoreline stretches about 30 miles into what is now the state of Vermont. So the prehistoric shoreline, then again, is where the Green Mountains are. Basically those foothills you would have seen the edge of the water. Now, thousands of years go by, and lots of sediment is going to deposit on the bottom of that seabed. And so, when all that water recedes, you have a very, very nutritious bunch of ground all over the place. So, if you go over to Vermont, you're going to find that agriculture is doing very, very well because of all of that nutrition in the ground left by thousands of years of sediment depositing. Now, where we are standing based on the soil samples is above the water line, but the garden is underneath the water line. Naturally, it's a good place to plant things because of all that nutrition in the soil. So with that said, let's proceed underwater and head down to the garden. The forest that was here looks a lot different than what we have today. Now, virgin forest once covered this peninsula, and now, of course, we do not have virgin forest, but secondary growth of some kind. So the pine trees that were once on this peninsula are described by a Lieutenant Dallairac as being about 100 feet tall, and then 4 soldiers holding hands in a circle are making the circumference of one of those trees. That is a big pine tree, a very big pine tree. I would hate to cut one of those down, let alone pull the stump out of the ground. Now the maple trees are similar. They are apparently about 200 feet high, and then 2 soldiers holding arms in that circumference are creating the base of one of those trees. So the forest itself is considerably larger in diameter than what we have here today. Naturally, the canopy is much more developed, and so there is a fair amount of light that does not actually reach the forest floor, and therefore we do not have as much undergrowth as we see here today. Now, some English soldiers will describe the forest as resembling the parks of Old England, so considerably more open with larger growth forest within. The Marquis de Montcalm, the French commander in North America, he writes, you can see 30 yards into the tree line. Now, how far can we see today? Not very far at all, can we? So it's important to imagine this forest around you opposed to what we have here today. Now, today, of course, is full of invasive species, largely because of William Ferris Pell and some of the trees that he brought here to this peninsula. Now, Pell was all about arboretums when he first came here in the early 19th century. And so there are some trees that still exist here today because of him. So the hawthorn, this is the hawthorn right here, that is introduced by the Pells. There's also the Norwegian spruce, and I'll point one out as we go along. And then my favorite, the honey locust, which is this one right here. You'll note that there are massive thorns all over that tree. It is the worst tree on the face of this planet. I don't know why he would have thought that was a good idea to bring here. And stay away from them because if you're pricked by one of the thorns, there's a toxin that is released, and you'll be in a lot of pain for about 3 days. But they make very good fence posts because they are so hard. But I don't see any other use for them. So, obviously, the animals have changed as well. When Samuel du Champlain comes here, he writes that there are bison in the area, and the sturgeon are apparently 25 feet long. It's a really big fish for freshwater lakes. And their scales apparently were so strong that they could not be pierced by any type of point. Now, there are also brown bear that were here at one point, and there were bison and flocks of pigeons that darkened the sky. And these are the passenger pigeons, and they're, of course, extinct today. Now, the main animal that live here is the Homo sapien, naturally. We have replaced pretty much everything that was here. So, let's head on down to the garden, talk about some of the other